This is Connected, showcasing the work of NHS National Services Scotland and our NHS Scotland colleagues.
Hello listeners and a warm welcome to Connected, your podcast from NHS National Services Scotland. I'm your host Richard Pigeon. I'm delighted to be joined this episode by co-hosts Karen White and Lisa Walker.
Karen, it's great to have you on board.
Thank you, Richard, and welcome everyone who has joined us from the new podcast platforms that we have joined. We're really excited to be bringing this to a wider audience and we hope you enjoy it.
And it's perfect timing because today's episode is packed with features highlighting successful collaboration across the NHS in Scotland, such as the Scottish Capsule Programme, SCOTCAP to its pals. SCOTCAP is a groundbreaking technology that transforms colonoscopy treatment using tiny video cameras that are contained in capsules swallowed by patients.
That's amazing. So that's really futuristic, isn't it? So you actually swallow the camera. How does that work?
So it's like the camera is inside what looks like a pill, it's swallowed by the patient, and then the camera takes images which are beamed remotely to clinicians to allow them to detect signs of cancer and other conditions. So our colleague Hannah Chalmers will be catching up with Dr Angus Watson of NHS Highland, who is clinical lead for SCOTCAP. Angus tells us all about SCOTCAP's remarkable benefits for patients and for our NHS, as well as updating us on the ongoing rollout across Scotland's health boards.
That all sounds really interesting, and recently they won the Industry Collaboration Award at the prestigious Holyrood Connect Awards earlier this month, so that's really exciting. Well done everyone who was involved.
A bit of a spoiler alert, but we've got a Celebrating Success feature later on where we talk more about the awards that have been won recently by NSS and our colleagues.
Thanks, Lisa, and that's definitely one I'm looking forward to later in the show.
From celebrating success to remembering history, October is Black History Month, and Connected brings you a special double feature focusing on its importance and relevance to all of us, regardless of colour. Harry Dozier, Race Equality Policy Co-ordinator at Scottish Government, and NSS's own Dr Nicole Priddee of the Scottish National Blood Transfusion Service reflect on their own personal and professional experience as Black people performing crucial work on behalf of the people of Scotland.
Yeah, it's a really powerful piece, and thanks again to Harry and Nicole for taking the time out to speak to us at Connected.
And speaking of time, Lisa, we're in danger of running out of it with such a packed show, so let's get connected.
The Scottish Capsule Programme is being rolled out across Scotland's health boards and has the power to transform patient experience, enable earlier diagnosis and deliver improved value for Scotland's NHS. Hannah Chalmers caught up with Dr Angus Watson of NHS Highland, clinical lead for the programme, to find out more. Over to you guys.
Hi Angus, thanks very much for joining us today. We last spoke in the summer of 2018 when the colon capsule pill had just been developed and trials were starting in the NHS Highlands. 2 years later, the capsule will now start to be trialled across other NHS Scotland boards.
Yeah, no, it's great to speak to you again, Hannah. I remember you phoning me, and I was in the Western Isles at the time, about to speak to colleagues in that health board about joining in the evaluation of colon capsule endoscopy. And it's been a very exciting journey since that time because we're now rolling out the service across the 14 health boards in Scotland.
That's great. Could you firstly explain a bit about the capsule and the SCOTCAP programme itself for our colleagues who may not be familiar with it?
The problem we're trying to address is that bowel disease is a very common problem that affects a lot of our population. And in fact, some of your listeners will have been or are being affected by bowel disease. So many people go and see their general practitioners about bowel problems, and some of those get referred up to hospital for a diagnostic test. Now, currently, there are three ways that we do diagnostics. There is the commonest way, which is a colonoscopy, and that's where we pass a fibre optic camera through the bowel to look directly at the lining and to take some biopsies if necessary. There's another way that involves a CT scanner, but we tend to reserve that for older and more frail patients. And then, of course, there's this new kid on the block, which is the colon capsule endoscopy. And that's a pill that you swallow. It's the size of a large vitamin tablet. It's got 2 cameras in, one at each end, and it takes thousands of pictures as it travels through the bowel during its incredible journey. And if you remember that film, you may have an idea of where the future lies. Patients do have to take powerful bowel prep to clean the bowel out so we get good images. And then you just poo the capsule out. We don't want it back. And when it's going through its journey, it's transmitting these pictures that it's taking to a digital recorder. And that captures all the images, which then get reported at a later stage.
That's absolutely fascinating to hear. And I think that's amazing what developments that have taken place for this to actually be something that's going to be rolled out. What have been the major developments or milestones since we last spoke, so over the past 2 years?
It's been a huge collaborative effort, including a number of organisations in Scotland. So, of course, NSS have been absolutely key in the development of the service. Digital Health and Care Institute and the health boards, my clinical colleagues who've been advising and getting involved. And so everyone's working together, and we started off an evaluation, one of the largest evaluation in the world, certainly the largest evaluation of colon capsule in the NHS. And that involved nearly 500 patients across 3 health boards. And we were collecting a lot of data from these patients. And we had 2 kind of parallel evaluations going on, one by the University of Strathclyde, who were asking patients what they thought about the service and asking managers and clinicians what their thoughts were about the service. And then University of Aberdeen, who've been measuring the outcomes and are continuing to measure the outcomes after the capsule. So we were developing that program, and then, of course, the pandemic hit, and never let a good crisis go to waste. And the team have worked doubly hard to make the capsule available across Scotland in a response to the pandemic, to allow health boards to recover quicker with their bowel diagnostics than they otherwise would have been able to.
COVID aside, have there been any particular challenges to getting the programme to such a crucial stage?
Yes, it has been challenging, and it's always challenging to introduce an innovation across lots of different health boards. And I would say this, but it'd be much easier if we had fewer health boards to deal with. There are things like information governance, making sure that the data is being very securely passed between the different entities that need the data. There have been issues around where the capsules are done, and we've experimented by using general practices and community hospitals, and we've even been looking at the potential of using local pharmacies. We've done some really innovative things like use the special pharmaceutical services to post out bowel prep to every single patient in Scotland. So normally what happens is that local endoscopy units will send out the bowel prep, the laxatives needed for the capsule. So instead of getting 14 different health boards to do that, we've worked hard with the Tayside Pharmaceutical Service for them to send out the bowel prep directly to the patients' homes, which is, again, a really unique and innovative way of delivering the service.
So things have progressed quite quickly, I would say, over the past 2 years. What do you think brought about the acceleration of the programme to the other boards, or was this just the plan all along to get this done within the past 2 years?
I mean, that's a really good question, because there's no doubt that the pandemic has accelerated our plans. If the virus hadn't hit us, we would have been slightly more measured in that we would have waited for the full evaluation to have completed all the data to come through. The Scottish Health Technology Group were going to do a further assessment of the technology, and NSS were going to create a business plan which they'd present to Scottish Government. What's changed is, of course, the virus, and we've been very agile in our response to it, in that we've analysed the data that we had, and we've realised that the capsule is very safe, it's well tolerated, it's very good at picking up significant bowel disease like polyps, large polyps in the bowel and bowel cancer. And we therefore engaged with clinicians across the health boards using webinars and other publications to engage them and to seek their opinion. And ultimately, we've got clinical leads in every health board that we've agreed a single pathway. We've agreed which patients will benefit most from the technology. And we're working hard now in deploying the services through health boards in a very controlled way. So very shortly, Greater Glasgow and Clyde and NHS Tayside are going to be the next boards that take up the service.
The final question I've got for you today is, what do you see happening with the programme in the next 2 years? Do you think by that time it will be rolled out to all the NHS boards in Scotland and you might be working on something else?
Yeah, so definitely. I think our plan is to have the service across Scotland. And it's really interesting because of our work in Scotland, NHS England colleagues are now wanting to start colon capsule endoscopy services in England. And so we've had multiple conversations with our colleagues south of the border. That's very exciting that work led by us in Scotland has been seen to be of value south of the border too. I think there's some really exciting developments. There are going to be cheaper and better pill cams coming onto the market. I think artificial intelligence is going to be a key player in going forward, in that AI will help us with the reading and reporting of the capsule images. And that's highly exciting. We're creating a national registry so that any patient who has a colon capsule endoscopy in Scotland will have their data, their outcome data recorded. And that data will be made transparent for everyone, all our partners to see. And that will help iterate the service. Part of that outcome data will include how patients feel about the service. So hopefully we'll be getting good quality feedback about how they feel, so that can iterate the service in the future. So lots of exciting developments around colon capsule endoscopy. And I think there are a lot of lessons learned along the way that could be transferred to other innovations. And that's exciting too, particularly the innovation partnership, which is a very novel way of procurement. And I think that is going to be highly applicable to other areas within NSS in particular.
Just before we head off, is there anything else that you'd like to add about the programme?
Yes, I would, Hannah. And I would just really like to value NSS contribution to this programme, because without them and the multiple different facets of NSS, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are now. And ultimately, this is going to benefit our patient. It will diagnose bowel cancer earlier. And I think it's absolutely key that NSS recognise the value that they have placed and have made on the whole programme. So my thanks go to the team.
Now we move on to a new section in which we take just 60 seconds to pass on some transformational tips. My emails had a bad habit of being so long that they made War and Peace look like the Beano. However, I recently heard about some good tricks to help improve my email practice, and we're delighted to share those with you today. Now Lisa, you've got 60 seconds to transform some lives. Good luck.
Here are our 6 top tips to make your emails more readable and save time. Short paragraphs, 4 lines maximum, even shorter is better. Short sentences. The shorter your sentences, the easier they are to read. It also makes it easier for the recipient to retain your information, so replace commas and join in words such as and or but with full stops. Normal language. Write in everyday language, not corporate. A good tip, read it out loud. If it sounds clunky, simplify it. Talk first. For complex or tricky topics, call via phone or Teams. Agree things verbally and then send a short email to confirm. Clear intro. Be clear at the top why you're writing. I'm writing to, and then insert the reason for the email. And last of all, headings. If you need to send a long or complex email, break it down into sections, each with a heading.
So shortly after Hannah caught up with Dr Watson, as I mentioned previously, SCOTCAP picked up an Industry Collaboration Award at the Holyrood Connect Awards. It is really well deserved, as you've heard of the great work they've been doing. Well done, everyone. I'm sure it won't be the last for the team.
It's been a bumper month for awards, recognising colleagues across NSS. Counter Fraud Services struck gold at the UK-wide Public Finance Awards 2020. CFS won the Outstanding Proactive Fraud Detection and Recovery Award, with judges hailing their fantastic use of insights and collaboration that delivered exceptional results. One of the many areas where the team saw incredible results was in the dental sector. A significant number of dental and ophthalmic patients were wrongly claiming exemption to their treatment costs. The counter fraud team used a blend of initiatives to reduce the annual level of incorrect payments claimed by more than £2 million. Here to tell us more about the impact for dentists is Paul Cushley, Director of Dentistry at NSS.
Hi Lisa, thanks. This was a fantastic piece of collaborative work between the general dental practices and some of the boards and counter fraud services, and they put together a raft of measures to ensure that patients who weren't exempt from charges were paying for the treatment, to ensure that the taxpayers in Scotland were getting value for money and ensuring every penny that they were devoting through taxation towards providing healthcare through dentistry was actually being used appropriate. There seemed to be a win-win. Public purse won, all that extra money being ring-fenced and used appropriately for dental care to improve the dental health of the community. And actually, there was a huge buy-in from the dental community as well, because quite a number of patients and quite a lot of these practices were exempt and unaware of the category of exemption that they actually required to make claims under. So there was a bit of enablement there to ensure that there was no fraud, but for those individuals who had some form of benefit, that they were enjoying the maximum access to the available care for them. So I think all round, I know that they've already won an this, but it was a process that has value for me as a taxpayer and for me as a dentist as well, to ensure that we're getting the maximum value for every penny that the government spend on dental services.
We also had the chance to catch up with Gordon Young, who heads that award-winning NHS Scotland Counter Fraud Services team.
Just to give you a bit of background, Counter Fraud Services exist to protect the NHS budget from any sort of financial crime, which could be fraud, theft or bribery and corruption. The current NHS budget is £13 billion, so we're talking about huge sums of money that require to be protected. We won an award from the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, and this is a professional body for people in public finance. They have over 14,000 members who work throughout the public service, including the NHS and local authorities. It's a well-recognised and respected body in the world of public finance, so to get an award from such an organisation really is something I'm extremely proud about. The award was for outstanding proactive fraud detection and recovery work. And from our perspective, this included a newly developed counter-fraud assessment tool to be completed as part of the procurement process, thereby helping to protect high-value NHS contracts. It also included a newly developed awareness workshop for HR professionals and line managers, providing advice and guidance on how a member of staff could become what is known as an insider threat. This is someone from within the organisation who uses their position to cause harm to the organisation, which could be financial, such as fraud, operational or reputational damage. The last element of the award was in relation to our patient claims team, who have developed new ways of working, which has seen significant increase in hard cash recoveries. Last year alone, they recovered over £1 million, which goes back to the Health Board. Our work ensures that vital NHS funds are protected and are available for direct patient care as the public intended. I'm extremely proud of the team for winning this award, as I believe it is justified recognition for the hard work and dedication they display in carrying out what at times can be a very difficult and challenging job.
And while NSS teams have been recognised, there was also a recent individual accolade for our colleague Willie McGee. The Oxygen Therapy Project Manager was awarded a British Empire Medal for services to the COVID-19 response.
And speaking of the COVID response, the National Procurement Team, who have done such incredible work sourcing, supplying and delivering hundreds of millions of critical PPE, have been shortlisted in the Outstanding Response category at the Go Awards 2020. These awards celebrate excellence in public procurement.
Congratulations to all those who have won awards, and we're keeping our fingers crossed for our national procurement colleagues. Now, the month of October is Black History Month, and Hannah Chalmers had the opportunity to catch up with two individuals happy to share their experience of working and living as a Black person in Scotland, and they discussed the importance of Black History Month.
That's right, Karen. And first up, we chat to Harry Dozier, Race Equality Policy Co-ordinator at Scottish Government, and formerly a colleague of ours within National Services Scotland. Then, for the second half, we meet up with Dr Nicole Priddee of the Scottish National Blood Transfusion Service.
Hi Harry, thanks very much for joining us this morning. We're going to talk a bit about Black History Month today, but also your own personal experiences. Firstly, please just tell me a little bit about you, your background, your job at the moment, and your experiences so far.
Great, thanks Hannah. As you said, my name is Harry Dozier. I'm, as you can hear, my accent isn't native Scottish. And I joke sometimes that it's like, oh, I could actually just have an Edinburgh accent, but no, it is in fact American. I'm originally from the US, but I came to Scotland in 2005 to study at Edinburgh Uni. And at the time, there was the Fresh Talent Scheme, which allowed you to get a 2-year working visa if you had a degree from a Scottish university. So I did that just kind of thinking, well, give it a shot, see what happens. Worst case scenario, I end up heading back to the States. And for me, Scotland almost immediately became home. And it was a wonderful place for me to be, because having grown up in the States, obviously, as people have seen with the Black Lives Matter movement at the minute, there are certain difficulties. Well, there's a lot of racism in the States. I won't even call it difficulties. Let's call a spade a spade. There's a lot of racism in the States, and when I moved to Scotland, I realized for the first time in my life I wasn't feeling that same sort of pressure. And that's not to say that there isn't racism or problems in Scotland, but it's a much more pervasive underlying current of racism in the States, and it's much more overt in a lot of ways in terms of the ways that you have to behave in public, the things that you can and can't say to certain people, and there's a code of conduct that you have to ascribe to as a Black person in the States that I felt liberated from. When I came to Scotland, I felt a lot of my headspace wasn't taken up with having to pay attention when I walked into a shop in case I didn't have, one of the things I was taught as a kid was never go into a shop without money in case someone accuses you of stealing. I still to this day look in windows rather than go into a shop just to browse, but it's things like that I suddenly realized wasn't constantly on my mind while I was here. And I think the moment I remember thinking that Scotland was home was I was at work and someone was on the phone to a colleague and they said, oh, well, just come round and speak to Harry. And he said, oh, well, he's the tall American guy. Black, and it was the first time in my life that I wasn't Black first.
Right. That
it wasn't the sole defining characteristic of me. And obviously that is a way to easily identify me in an office, but it was such a wonderful feeling to realize that wasn't the first thing that people thought of me, that the whole of my character, I mean, obviously my Americanism, but as a Black person from the States, it was nice to be American first, as opposed to the color of my skin. So that's what brought me here.
Thank you for going through that. It's very interesting to hear your perspective of coming to Scotland as someone who wasn't, natively Scottish, but I like to think sometimes that Scotland's the kind of country that if you want to be Scottish, you are.
Yeah.
Like it's just right. Okay, you live here, you work here, you've got a partner here. Right, you're Scottish. That's just kind of how we are here, or certainly how my generation is anyway.
Yeah.
So we're moving on to just race equality, and we're going to go a bit, and hopefully you'll be able to chat a bit about this. Obviously, we both work in public sector. You work for Scottish Government, and I work for NSS. Which are two quite closely linked organisations. We do a lot of partnership working together and work on a lot of policies and programmes together. Why do you think it's important that we have a race equality framework within the public sector?
Yeah, I think for me, as I said, my experience of coming to Scotland was one of a bit of relief, but obviously it's not perfect. Racism is going to happen regardless of what country you're in. Scotland's not immune to that. And I think for me, in the Scottish context, in America, it's very clear where the lines are in terms of racism, Black, Latino, white, and lots of other, and Asians. And whereas in Scotland, I think there's lots of subtle differences that I never would have expected in terms of the kind of invisible minorities, so like Gypsy travelers and Polish communities, that experience racism in different ways. And you still have obviously visible minorities, so your Asian, your Black community who have experienced racism as well. And I think the importance of having the framework is to make sure that we're aware that it's happening, because I think the biggest difficulty with racism is getting over the hurdle that people don't believe it exists.
Yes, absolutely.
And as one of the things, as you said, Hannah, since I've been in Scotland, I've always been told, well, you're Scottish now. If you choose for this to be your home, you're Scottish. It's the phrase that Jock Tempson's bairns, which is a beautiful ideal. However, there's still a very real reality that people experience racism and discrimination along different lines than you may expect. So I know we work some with the Irish community as well, and the experience of sectarianism in certain areas makes it difficult for us to separate out the fact of these kind of traditional, kind of long-standing racism issues that exist in Scotland with some of the newer kind of newer quote-unquote racism that people from visible minority groups may experience. But you can't separate all of that out. I mean, like say, people experience racism in different ways, but it's still there. And having the framework helps us focus on those ideals and helps us kind of own up to the fact that it still exists, because you can't fix something that you won't admit to. And that's what the framework is there for, is to help us kind of say, no, it isn't perfect, and we can only work to get better. And this is what better will look like when we get there.
Definitely. And I think it's in particular with this sort of iteration of the Scottish Government, I definitely think equality across the spectrum, not just with race equality, but with gender equality, disability rights as well. I think that's something that the Scottish Government are keen to focus on. And it is quite nice, like living. I mean, I myself I am disabled. I've got an invisible disability. So it's quite nice, like having a devolved government that will kind of stand up for sort of minority groups and are making that part of the way that they want the country to work as well. And I do think you're definitely right when you say that racism does exist in Scotland. There are people who don't want to believe that it does, but it does, and it's time that many countries, Western countries, kind of looked inwardly at that as well. We're going to move on to Black History Month. So in the UK, October is Black History Month. I know it's a different month in the US. Is that right?
Yes, in the US it's February.
February, yeah. So October is Black History Month. I've already seen quite a lot of kind of campaigns from supermarkets. For example, Sainsbury's have got a really strong campaign for Black History Month this year, and you've seen it as a kind of far and wide across sort of public and private sectors. I think it's probably got a lot to do with the Black Lives Matter movement as well, and I think it's not a bad thing that we've got this front and centre this year. But I mean, I guess I would say it's not just about a month. Race equality is an issue year round. But moving on to your opinion on how you feel as a Black person about Black History Month, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's weird for me sometimes, because being from the States where Black History Month originated, it's a very different thing in the States in some ways, because Black History Month was always part of my experience growing up. Both my parents were involved in the civil rights movement. My mother grew up in Georgia, so she remembers the first time going to a desegregated school when she was about 10. So she grew up under the Jim Crow laws. So the legacy of slavery and the impact that it has had on the Black community in the States is still very much alive. It's still of recent history. Slavery was only abolished in the States in 155 years ago. So my great grandmother was the daughter of a woman of enslaved people, and I met my great grandmother. So it's still very much part of our recent history, and I think that in addition to the amazing contributions that Black people have made to both American and UK society, is the real point of Black History Month. It's the ethos of there was struggle, there are painful parts of our history, but despite that, we've been able to contribute wonderful and amazing things to society, that we wouldn't be the society where we are today, that if it weren't for the Black community in both countries. And we did that in spite of the hardships we faced. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's what Black History Month is. It's that celebration of that contribution, as well as the recognition of the difficulties that we faced. And so I think when you look at those two things together, it paints a real picture of strength and pride that I think every Black person should get to feel when they look at the whole of their history, because I see it particularly in the UK, and that pride in country and your heritage. And it should be the same for all minority groups who are part of the UK and part of the US as well. We should be able to have that pride in our heritage as part of Scotland, as part of the UK, as part of America. And that's what Black History Month is. It's to be able to join in that national pride, but also cultural pride.
Absolutely. That's a sort of fantastic summary of what that means to you, and it's just so interesting to hear your perspective of it as a Black person, as someone who is not from the UK but now lives here and has made a home here. It's just so interesting. Moving on, so did you have any role models growing up? Do you think this is important for children from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds to have?
I'm quite lucky because I had lots of role models growing up. I think, as I said, both my parents were involved in the civil rights movement. And so from a very early age, we were taught about our history, and came and fought and struggled for us to get to the places we are. And for me, it was very obvious that members of my own family were role models, because my aunt was one of the first Black independent bookstore owners in New Haven, where I'm from, in Connecticut. And so she, from early age, was like, right, this is your history, this is what you need to know, this is who you are, you're not just the things that people on the street tell you are. You're more than the restrictions that you feel on your life. You're part of a bigger family and a bigger history, and that in itself was really instrumental to me becoming the person that I am, who stands up for equality and says, you know what, no, it's not right. We deserve more. And I think it's really important for children to see that. Even if they don't want to become an equality champion, or if they want to be a scientist or an artist or an athlete, that's for them to decide. But in order for them to be it, they have to see it. And because I remember those moments for me when I realized that the things that I was passionate about were possible. And it wasn't until I saw them that I knew that they could become possible. And so I think not just in Black History Month, I think throughout all of society in life. Children should be seeing people who look like them, who can do the work that they want to do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, I would agree. I think it's definitely important for children, especially children from either Black and ethnic minority backgrounds or disabled children, to see sort of either their parents or someone who is like them, who they can identify with, to achieving things that they want to achieve. I definitely agree with you there.
A bit like you're saying, because I have a hidden disability as well. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I remember the first time that I saw a celebrity talk about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I was just like absolutely enamored. It's Evie Oddly from RuPaul's Drag Race who won.
I love.
Like, oh my gosh, she has the same thing as me. That's like, it's not just me, and that it's stuff like that reminds me. Yeah, I can do anything. Despite things that other people consider, impairments, are the things that can actually take me somewhere that I want to go.
Side note, I absolutely love RuPaul's Drag Race. Yeah. I actually had a drag queen at my hen do last year.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. That's a side note. But no.
Don't want this to turn into the RuPaul's podcast.
Yeah. I've just got one more question and a little bit of context for people listening. Harry actually used to work for NSS. So he's got some really good insight into our organisation, but as well as Scottish Government, who he works for at the moment. Harry, what do you think NSS can do to work towards being a more diverse organisation? How can we improve?
I think the answer is the same for all organisations across Scotland and anywhere. It's recruitment and retention. It's having diverse recruitment panels. It's having people in the rooms where decisions are being made that are diverse, because not just diversity of experience, but thought, and will make all the difference, because so much of the work we do is for people with lots and lots of different experiences. So if the people in the room making those decisions don't have that multitude of experience, then it's never going to get better. So one of the things that I would always suggest is that any organization that does a recruitment exercise make the effort to try and get diverse recruitment panels, and say, if we can just have one person on the panel from a different ethnic background, someone with a visible disability, or, gender balance as well, that will help start create the organization that we want to see. Because again, I've been in situations where I've been on recruitment panels and someone's made a comment, not a negative comment, saying, "Oh well, they looked down when they did this," and that's a kind of, and I don't know if that's a great sign. And for me, it's like, well, no, I've been in that experience and I struggle with anxiety, so I know I saw what that was, and that wasn't a lack of confidence, that was a coping mechanism, which helped them get through that moment, and then they answered the question well, so it wasn't a reflection of their ability to communicate. And so it's just it's that multitude of experience then makes that recruitment space so much more inclusive. And then once the recruitment is more inclusive, the people in the organization are more diverse, and then it's making sure that the work environment is conducive to people from diverse backgrounds succeeding. And again, that only comes when the people in the rooms making the decisions are more diverse. They can then support individuals from all backgrounds to be the best version of themselves at work every day.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Harry. Just before we finish up our time today, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I just hope everyone will take the time to use Black History Month to investigate and learn about someone that they didn't know something about. I think overall, that's what Black History Month is. It's just about learning something new. It's not, there's no agenda to change who you are or to change your mind. It's just learn something, just be curious and learn something about if you see a figure from Black that you hadn't heard about, Google them and find out what they did, read their book, or just learn a little bit more. Because I think once you start going down that that rabbit hole of learning, it opens up so many opportunities for other things, to learn new things, and that's all we want, is for people to learn and expand themselves.
I'm speaking with Dr Nicole Priddee, who is a consultant haematologist at the Scottish National Blood Transfusion Service.
Hi, Hannah. Thanks for having me.
Firstly, please just tell me a bit about you, your background, your job role, and experiences that you have had.
As you mentioned, I'm a consultant haematologist working at the Blood Transfusion Service. I actually started off, and I'm born and bred in Barbados, and I moved to the UK back in '98 to start university in Northern Ireland, hence the accent. I spent 14 years in Northern Ireland and eventually moved to Scotland to start my consultant career in 2012. I must say, moving to Northern Ireland, that was quite an exciting time. It was quite entertaining. It was very different for me because I had come from a country where I was in the majority to a country where I was in the minority for the first time. But I was pleasantly surprised by the Northern Irish welcome, and everyone welcomed me with open arms and genuine curiosity without any animosity or hostility.
Mm-hmm.
So I had friends from all over Northern Ireland, perhaps seeing me as free bed and breakfast in Barbados, I don't know, but I had a great time leaving home for the first time and being quite far away from my parents. I found that I was very welcomed.
Mm-hmm.
And that continued really through my university career. And then after I graduated from university, I worked my way up to consultant level in Northern Ireland. I spent 1 year in Manchester, but vast majority of time I was in Northern Ireland. And it was when I started work that I noticed some subtle differences.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were talking to someone that I had met for the first time outside of the work context, and I said I worked at the hospital, I'd be given a list of options of jobs that I did in the hospital, but none of them ever included doctor. It was as though I couldn't possibly be. Yes, I could work in the hospital, and I had a limited array of roles that, looking like me, that I could fulfill. And that continued throughout hospital rotations as well.
Mm-hmm.
That every 4 or 6 months, when we changed the rotation and I went to a different hospital where I hadn't been before, I was perceived as the dodgy foreign doctor until proven otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something I got used to, but it's still a bit frustrating having to justify your existence every 6 months or every 4 months as you go along. But it was just a part and parcel, and quite quickly I proved my worth. I could speak English. I could be clearly understood. I was good at my job. I worked hard. So it was a little nuisance to overcome, but that was life. Moving into my consultant life, which has been entirely in Scotland, similar things continued in that if I went onto a ward that wasn't my base ward with one of my registrars, if I was going in with a Caucasian male registrar, it was assumed by nursing staff and patients he was my boss. He was a consultant. I was the registrar or below. Which again, it's frustrating, but I just got used to laughing it off. So those are my experiences, and I would say that the frustration that I describe in having to constantly justify my existence. That's perhaps something that can lead to stereotypes when people think of the quote-unquote angry Black woman or angry Black person.
Yes.
Well, if you're already busy and on the top of your to-do list, you have to explain why you're there and that you deserve to be there every time, it can wear you down.
Of course, yeah. Thank you very much for that, Nicole. Moving on to the next question. Why do you think it's important that we have a race equality framework or race equality policies within the public sector?
Well, I think it's important that we have it in all sectors, to be honest. And hopefully it's not a tick box exercise, but it's something that will make individuals in a corporate organization able to reflect and focus on what work environment they've created and whether or not it could foster discrimination either consciously or unconsciously. Does it take into account your cultural backgrounds? And I would say, even though it says race equality framework, everyone is different, and perhaps having a cultural equality framework or equivalent would be more relevant, so that we can actually see beyond color and just seek to understand everybody. Why might they behave like that in a certain situation? What is it that they've experienced before that has led that? Does our organization make them feel like that by its very being? So I think it's just important that whatever policy just allows you to reflect, so that everybody feels welcome, feels comfortable in their skin, and not have to apologize for being who they are.
Absolutely. Thank you. What does Black History Month mean to you, Nicole?
Black History Month is a new concept to me, having grown up in a country where I was in the majority. But now that I'm on the other side of the coin, it's just an occasion to celebrate the successes of people who look like me, and it helps make others aware of the journey that we've been through. Because if you've grown up not exposed to many Africans or many Afro-Caribbeans, you might have absolutely no need to know about the history or understand the history. But with Black History Month, when it's more evident, it gives you the opportunity just to learn something new and expand your horizons. It might not have felt relevant before, but it is now.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Did you have any role models growing up, and do you think this is important for children from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds to have?
Yes, I was fortunate that I had lots of positive role models when I was growing up. The political leaders of my country, they looked like me. They fought for free education for everybody in my country after slavery was abolished. And they realized that we have to invest in all our people, no matter what they look like. I grew up in a country with great world-class sportsmen like Sir Garfield Sobers that we could celebrate. So having those positive role models for me meant that there weren't any limitations placed on me. I had the option of having good world-class education for free, and I knew that the world was my oyster. On television, I had these same role models. I was able to see Black professionals. I was able to see comedies with Black students at university. So again, I knew that that was open to me if I wanted it. So I found that really helpful. And in turn, for my children, I'd like them to have similar positive role models. And not just role models that look like them, but role models of all colours, creeds and classes, so that they actually remain open-minded. They know that they're not limited because of how they look, and they know similarly no one else is limited because of how they look as well.
I think a lot of parents are like that as well. Absolutely agree with that. My final question for you, Nicole, is more focused on the organisation. What do you think NSS can do to work towards being a more diverse organisation? How can we improve?
I simply think as an organisation that the focus should be on valuing all your employees so that it's a place that people feel welcome, that no one feels marginalised and they want to work there for a long time. And from my limited time here, the things I think that could be improved are the layers of communication, and I also think that you should allow all your employees, including your ethnic minority employees, to feel empowered, that they can have a voice, they can speak up if they say, or if they see something that's not quite right, and they can feel that they've been listened to and things have changed. And from my personal perspective, I know that I'm privileged because I'm in a fairly senior position, so I'm closer to management tiers than other employees might feel. And certainly at times during the COVID outbreak, I've felt that employees who are perhaps more at a grassroots level were marginalised because there are not as many of us. And so some issues relating to us, like COVID risk assessments, it certainly felt like it wasn't a priority. And so it could be pushed down the line until an absolutely perfect policy was reached, rather than allowing managers to communicate with their employees and say, we're aware that we should be doing risk assessments and we're working on it. So that line of communication took a while to open. And also having the employees empowered so that if they were worried, they knew that the employers were working on risk assessments, but if they had any worries, just letting them know that they could come to their management team if they were particularly concerned. From senior level conversations, it took a lot of work and there was a lot of resistance to even just getting that far and saying, okay, our solution might not be in place, but you can speak to your employees or the people you line manage and let them raise any concerns with you and deal with things on a case-by-case basis until we've got a full assessment in place. And I must say that actually had really upset me, even though as I said, I was fortunate and I could work from home. And I just hope that we could learn from that
yes,
everybody's valuable. There's no job that is worth more or less. We're all here working together to make a better NSS and a better NHS Scotland.
I couldn't agree with that more. Thanks very much for sharing your thoughts on that. Just before we finish up, is there anything else that you would like to say today?
I'd just like to ask everyone, when they meet someone new, someone that's not like them, be curious about that person, be willing to learn, be willing to find out what's the common thread that unites us, rather than seeking to find areas of division. Just like weaving threads or string, it's stronger if we bind together and we can use our differences to make things stronger.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Nicole.
A great double feature to finish this episode, and we would actively encourage everyone to take the opportunity to learn a little bit more about Black history.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and please do subscribe to our podcast and get in touch with your feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks, Lisa, and thank you all for listening. NSS Connected is a production of NHS National Services Scotland. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and stay connected.